What's up, guys? This is Jim with Unplayable, and we are back, baby. That's right. I have a brand new deck tech just for you guys. We are still right in the middle of set 5, Legends of the Force, and a new Force user has entered the fray. And by new Force user, I mean Han Solo is so back. I'm finally back on camera. Han 1's kind of back in the meta. Not yet, but about to be. And I'm going to tell you guys why. So really excited to share this deck with you guys. I think there's a lot of really fun ideas in here that's really just tailoring to the new set and what's been going on. We're kind of in that point of the meta where it's like a lot feels pretty stale. Trying to come up with new ideas is tricky. And so when you find something that you get excited about, you just want to share it. And so that's my goal here today. Is just to share with you guys what's been going on with good old Han 1 Green Force Synergies. Let's make it happen. So just wanted to go ahead and start with just showing you guys kind of the list. If that's what you're here for, you can take this list, run it, see how it goes in your local meta, and be about your day. That's totally fine. And I'll link the deck link down below as well. But Han 1 Green has truly been around since the start of this game. There was like Sabine Green, Han 1 Green, a couple other like control lists as well. But this has stood the test of time until Set 5 comes out. Everyone and their brother is using Force Throw in their deck list now. Just Red Force is just completely taken over with the other Han 2, running some like red-blue synergies going on. A lot of villain lists are now running Force Throw, tapping into Force Throw, Force Lightning as well. Just some really strong cards that they now actually have some tools to do something with it. And so Han 1 Green hates Force Throw, like more than other decks do. The reason being is because Han's ability, which most of you guys should know by now, is on the leader side, it's action, exhaust, and you put a card from your hand into play as a resource and ready it. So it does come in ready. You get to use an extra resource that turn. The issue, though, is you're having to essentially discard a card from your hand to get this resource buff for that turn. At the end of the turn, you destroy one of those, a resource. It doesn't have to be that one. And so there's some good plays that we can talk about in a little bit. That, again, if you already know Han 1 Green, I won't spend too much time on those. But a great example is if you get the Millennium Falcon out on turn 1, it's ready, you attack in. On the follow-up turn, you exhaust a resource to keep it out on play, but then you can destroy that exhausted resource. So that's kind of the idea of what Han is trying to do. And before this set, that was an exact turn 1 play that most Han 1 players were attempting. It was put a resource down, play the Falcon, exhaust a resource, and destroy that resource so you still have the normal amount of resources for the next turn and still have the Falcon ready to roll in play. So because of that, you are trying to get a lot of early tempo out, just have stronger units out earlier, and trying to deploy Han earlier than your opponents. But you're having to get rid of your hand to make that happen. And so Force Throw against you hurts that much more because your hand's already depleted because you've been using them to ramp, and now they're taking away your last card, killing your board, and so you have no hand, nothing on board, and we're really sad. Also, Pillage is starting to come back in meta a little bit more, specifically with like the new Kylo list that's come out and been really popular. Pillage is really good, and Anakin list still really popular as well, and that just rips 2 cards from your hand. So a lot of ways to kind of mess with what you're doing. Quinlan is still doing Force Throw, Spark of Hope, Ahsoka Tano, just so many things that's going on this that a lot of people said Han 1 is dead. All that is still true. All of those things can still happen. The reason I like this a lot more is because we're actually tapping deeper into the late game than a lot of the earlier Han 1 Green lists were doing. So we have just more 7-drops available to us, and I'll get to those in a little bit. We have more late game to refill the board after we are tapped out and kind of starting to top deck. And so because there's more cards you can draw in the late game, to recycle your hand to keep the board going strong, you're able to build up some early tempo. Even if they deplete your hand, the likelihood of you drawing into that late game and still being able to kind of come over the top and win the game is still really strong. So like I said, this is the list. As you'll see, there's a lot of cards here from set 5, a lot of the Force Synergies going on. We'll get into some more of that in a little bit. But just at least wanted to start with the elephant in the room of why Han 1 Green is no longer seeing play. And now I'll get to actually talk about some of the new additions to this list that I think are really strong. So the first question is why Force? In previous versions of this deck, we've been playing all of the Falcons we ever could. We have been piloting those things with Chewies, with Han Solo, a lot of different opportunities to just take advantage of that early game, go really strong into space, and just absolutely steamroll the opponent. But set 5 brought a lot of really sweet cards to the play that most people just haven't even seen on a table yet. And I really think Yellow-Green Hero are some of the strongest cards in this new set that we just haven't seen anything for yet. And so I wanted to try to see, like, okay, what's the best opportunity to actually take advantage of Ethkoth, to take advantage of the new Yoda Legendary, to be able to use some of these really powerful tools. Vernestra is another great one that's like a turn 2 play that if you have the Force, she comes out ready, and so it's like a 3/4 ready unit for 3, which is just awesome. That these are some really powerful cards that just haven't found a home yet. Haven't found that perfect deck list that it's like they just work. The new Qui-Gon is in here as well. It's a 7/5 ambush that when it dies, it can basically put another ground unit on the top or bottom of that player's deck. So you can do it to yourself. Most likely you're going to do it to your opponent. You can't do it with leaders, unfortunately, but you can ambush into their leader to kill their leader and return the other ground unit to the top or bottom of their deck. They get to make that decision, but essentially you're like pseudo destroying it. But rather than going to the discard pile, they will get to get it back and try to replay it later. But just a lot of really powerful cards in this color combo. Keller and Beck is another one that's not listed here quite yet. But Keller and Beck is insane. You play it, it's 7 costs. You look at the next several cards of the top of your deck, and you get to play one of them for 3 less. And so on 7 resources, you look for a 3-drop or lower, you play it, you're happy. On 10 resources, you could play it up to a 6 cost because you spent 7 for Kellerin, you get the 3 buff, or like 3 resource advantage, and then you can play up to a 6-drop as well. So a lot of really cool plays here, a lot of ways again to keep getting more and more units out. So you're not just playing 1 unit at a time, a lot of times you're playing 2 or 3. As well as, just some really powerful cards. The new Obi-Wan's really great to just get some strong Sentinel in play. So there's just so many great things you can do with the Force. This one doesn't rely so much on needing the Force to work at all. So I'm actually not running specific cards like Youngling Padawan to like play and immediately get the Force, because it's always printed on the cards themselves, either as like a when played effect, when defeated effect, or on Jedi Consular you have to exhaust it and use the action to get the effect. So you're actually not using the Force a ton, but when you do use the Force, it's very impactful and very meaningful. And so it's still important to try to build up that board, attack with those Force units to get it. That's why we're using the Force base. But it's not so impactful that like you really need that turn 1 Force opportunity to make it happen. And then I just included other things in here for why the Force, as far as General's Blade and Yoda's Lightsaber, 2 of the most powerful just upgrades that are in this new set, or taking advantage of this new set. General's Blade has been so good. People keep trying to figure out where to make this work. I know a lot of like Luke Green lists are using it to really snowball early. But 3/3 stats is just good, and buffing that unit to kind of avoid some kill points, as well as just pushing a lot of damage, is really strong. Yoda's Lightsaber I actually have in my sideboard currently. But it's a really great opportunity for like a cheap way to bring Yoda back online, to heal a little bit if you're going against a more aggressive deck. I still think this deck does fine into aggro lists, which again we'll talk about in a little bit, but it's just that much extra cushion to make sure that you can come over the top and win those type of games. So big fan of what's going on kind of with the Force synergies there. The other piece too, one of the little synergies between Han and like Keller and Beck in particular is you want to play a lot of 3-drops in Han, because you can put a resource down on turn 1 and play a 3-drop. So you already have a lot of 3-drops naturally in this deck. So when you play Keller in at 7, which again, a lot of times you're doing on that Han flip turn anyway, you're very likely to find an impactful 3-drop, whether that's Millennium Falcon, Vernestra, even Obi-Wan. So many good things that you can pull out at that point that you're very likely to find something you're excited to play. Wanted to go ahead and just hit real quick on just the turn ones. You're only going to see 5 total cards that you could play without using Han's ability. And that's 3 copies of Gunji, 2 copies of Jedi Consular. Reason for that is there's not that many 2-drops that kind of fit what this deck's trying to do that you're actually excited to play. Again, we've already talked about Youngling Padawan. It's just a 2-cost 2/3 that gives you the Force. Early on, it was in my list, but I've actually removed it because I just don't think the stat line is strong enough. When Han 2 blue users are playing out Ogdo Bogdos as like a 5/3 stat line, just getting the Force early is not strong enough to combat that. Obviously, Gunji also dies to that Ogdo Bogdo, as does the Jedi Consular, but I just don't want to have even more copies of cards that automatically lose to that. Where against the rest of the field, these 2 cards still do great work. Jedi Consular is a funny one actually, because I think just the threat of what it can do scares your opponent way more than like what it typically does. But they have to answer it. They know you're a deck that's trying to play 7 drops, 6 drops, 8 drops. I know that was out of order. But big creatures kind of at the end. I've played too much Magic, clearly. Big Force users at the end of the game. That if they let the Jedi Consular stay alive, they are probably going to lose. And so that's one that I actually don't mind playing turn 1 and just attacking with, just to really mess with the opponent and make them think that I'm going to do something crazy. If they let it happen, great. I typically don't set my hand up to make that happen. But other things you'll see on here for great turn 1 plays, resupply is still unreal. Essentially, turn 1, you put a resource down, so you're down to 3 cards in hand. You play resupply, so that on the next turn, you would resource a card and be at 4 total resources. And so you're just 1 turn away from getting to that Han flip turn and really spiking the game. And so if you can play a resupply early, I typically try to, unless I'm going against like a Quinlan, who's trying really hard to make your hand go to 0. I'll usually play a little bit slower in specifically that matchup. But again, I'll talk a little bit more about some of like the top meta decks and what we're kind of trying to do. But for the most part, I am a-okay resupplying on turn 1, trying to get something down on turn 2 that'll stick, and then turn 3 doing the whole combo with Han 1. For those of y'all that haven't played the leader, I'll just hit on it real quick. The way a lot of people will play this is at 5 resources. So typically turn 4, if you're able to ramp turn 3, you'll have 5 resources. You use the Han ability to get yourself to 6. Now you can flip Han Solo, and his on attack is to do that ability, but take the top card of your deck and put it into play as a resource. And so on the 5 resource turn, you go to 6 to deploy Han, you attack with Han to now go to 7, and then you hopefully play a Ewing, a Keller and Beck, or a Qui-Gon on that turn. That's like the ideal play, and your opponent knows that. It's a very common line. They're trying to stop that from happening. But if you play a resupply, it's just happening that much quicker, which you get really excited about. So the other ones on here, I try typically not to play these, but I can. It's totally fine to in specific circumstances. And so that's where you have like your blue leader, your Obi-Wan, your Vernestra, your Millennium Falcon, cards that are really strong still. You really have to try to weigh, is it worth me losing a card in hand just to get out more tempo? And so that just comes with a lot of play and really understanding the matchups and like when you need to fight for that early board and when you can actually take a step back and just try to get to the Han flip turn as early as possible. Eth Koth is a great card, but it's actually harder to pull off than you think. It's another one that I'm actually just fine with it being a 5/4 that they have to respond to more often than not. Otherwise, if you're trying to play too much into that, you're just going to get blown out by them having an answer. There's a lot of ways to deal that 4 damage, but it's a great threat, especially if you can get it out a turn early. Again, against Sabine, it kills Sabine. It stays alive. They might have to waste an early ECL with like a K2 SO to kill it, something like that. And if they're doing that, you're in pretty good shape. So there are a lot of 3 drops in this game. It's great if you can play one and it makes sense for you to play one. But understanding what should you do on that turn one play really is the crux of this deck. And again, against decks that are trying to destroy your hand, likely to play Force Throw, you typically don't want to push that unless it's to resupply to get Han out as early as possible. If you already have a 7-drop in hand, or a 6-drop, which we'll talk about in a little bit. All right, so the flip turn. Again, I've already kind of mentioned the 5, 6, 7 kind of play. Ideally, you are wanting to play U-Wing or Kelleran Beck, because Kelleran, we'll say 7/7, like on a vanilla unit, is essentially worth 6 resources. I know like the Darth Vader Legendary has those stats. But on the flip turn, you can get out one of your 3 drops. So typically at this point, you've already attacked with a forced unit. So if you get Vernestra or Millennium Falcon, that's 3 more damage going to their base on the flip turn. As well as a 7/7 coming at them next turn if they can't answer that. And so those are kind of my favorites. I'm trying to go pretty wide on board on that flip turn in particular. And I almost want to taunt them to try to take out Han Solo because they're the fear of like, but what if he gets Yoda? What if he gets Home One? I want to be almost scarier than the actual units that are on that board. So I'm totally fine at that point if they get rid of Han Solo. I've already gotten the tempo advantage, and I'm looking to close out the game in the next turn, maybe 2 turns at the latest, most of the time. But like I said, usually you're using the Han ability to get to this. The exceptions would be if you don't have a 7-drop and you have a lot of other things that you're excited to play. Sometimes it's okay to wait a turn. Also, if I don't have a 7-drop and I have like Yoda coming out with the wide board, I might consider waiting to kind of make that play happen, or Home One as well. But for the most part, you are going to be the aggressor in most matchups. Again, Sabine is kind of one of the few exceptions, as well as some of the other like super early or aggressive lists like Vader, Poe's kind of on there as well right now. But for the most part, you're pushing damage just as fast, if not faster, than even those decks can. And so you're usually going for that unless there's a major threat that you need to answer. So that's really the crux of this deck as well. So again, the turn 1 play of how do you do that, and then also this flip turn of how are you getting to this and how are you playing around some of their answers. So if you recognize that they're holding back a lot of resources, let's say you're playing against a green villain that has all 5 resources up and waiting for you to play that Han Solo, they probably have Overwhelming Barrage. So you want to make sure you do something that can get around Overwhelming Barrage. If you notice that it's like any red forced user, they probably have Force Throw, which means they're going to play Force Throw and discard from their own hand just a giant card. One trick against Force Throw, which has been said time and time again, try to play around it yourself. A lot of newer players will always make their opponent discard and just hope that they discard a 6-drop or more. You should probably keep something in your hand that's below 6 so that Han Solo can stay alive just in case that happens. Good players typically will get rid of their Crate Dragons, their own copies of Han Solo, things like that will just kill this thing on the spot. Because of that, we're actually running 3 copies of Depa Bilaba, which is a 6-cost 5/7 ambush with Saboteur. I love Depa. It's a phenomenal card. It has done so much work for me in games. And everyone expects you to be playing those 7-drops, which ideally you want to, but knowing that you also could have a 6-drop to mess with their plans goes a long way to just solidify your game plan. Because sometimes, again, if you're really playing hard into the Han ability, getting rid of all of your cards in hand, and you just have that 1 7-drop left and just hope and pray they don't have the Force Throw, guess what? They probably have the Force Throw. Their deck is built to do that, or the Spark of Rebellion, or the Ahsoka. Their deck's built to do that, and so they've probably kept one back exactly for this play. It's not luck, it's how their deck's designed. Therefore, playing around that and trying to keep 2 cards in hand or another opportunity is super important. And so, like I said, keeping Depa in some circumstances, especially against Red Force anything, is really smart. And also pretty good stats. It's not too underrate compared to like a Ewing or a Kelleran. And so I'm totally fine to play that on those turns. So like I said, navigating that flip turn is really important for this deck in particular. So again, have this on here. Depa, Ewing, Kelleran, kind of all of those major options you're wanting to play. It's okay to play Qui-Gon. It just doesn't have as big of like a stability on your board. The thing I love about Kellerin is like there's a 7/7 coming down, and usually a 3 cost that's either attacking their base or has Sentinel and blocking them from killing you essentially. Depa is great again, especially if they're trying to play around that Han attack. And Ewing's just always amazing. The one critique I have about Ewing right now in this list that I still want to analyze and figure out is it's actually really hard to efficiently play 7 resources worth of cards. Obviously, if you're playing Qui-Gon or Kellerin, you spend all 7. But because this doesn't really have many 2-drops and doesn't really have many 4-drops either, a lot of times you're either playing one big unit or 2 3-drops. And it's not the end of the world, but it is technically inefficient. But because of the flexibility Ewing has, and because you're searching so many cards with Kellerin, with Ewing, and able to get cards back with Home 1 from the discard pile, I think you're going through fast enough that you should have a pretty good idea for what's in your deck still. It is really important to pay attention to what you're cycling through. So if you play Kellerin Beck, try to remember the 6 cards that went on the bottom. So you know if there's 2 Home 1s down there, you're not going to see a Home 1, which is a bummer because you want to play that card, but it's also great for if you're about to Ewing, knowing those are 2 8-drops that you're not likely to see. So it's important to remember those. You actually do cycle through most of your deck because of cards like this. But this is really what you're wanting to play. Also want to just hit real quick on the late game. The 8-drops are actually pretty hard to play, I'll be honest. I'm really okay with resourcing those early. They're really powerful, but you have to remember the turn that you flip Han and you get to 7 resources. You're playing a 7-drop, so you would naturally think you could play an 8-drop the next turn, and that's actually not true. Because at the end of that turn, you have to destroy 2 resources, so you're going from 7 to 5. Then obviously you can resource a card to go to 6, so it's kind of 7 to 6. But you don't have a way to get an additional 2 resources. When you attack with Han, you go back to 7. So that's why there's way more 7-drops in here than 8-drops, because playing a 7-drop into a 7-drop is actually pretty likely. And so if you can pull off that, you're great. You're feeling good. It's going to be an entire other turn before you could play an 8-drop. And even still, that means that Han Solo has to stay alive, or he has to die that turn, and you have to discard a card to play that 8-drop. And so 8-drops are actually really hard to play. And that's why I'm not running Reinforcement Walker right now. And I'd actually consider going down to 2 Home 1s. I like the way that they stabilize the board at the end of the game and can just kind of get over the top. But also the ones that I have in here, as far as Yoda and Home 1, don't win the game on the turn they're played. It's not like they come in ready. Home 1 can bring in something that's already ready, but that's only for like 3 damage. Yoda can kill the big thing that's trying to kill you, but it has to wait a turn to attack, and it's only attacking for 5. And so they're really good cards to stabilize at the end of the game. That's why I still think they're valuable in here. But the 7-drops really are what you're hoping to win the game with. The 8-drops is kind of the fail-safe, make sure you don't just get blown out because they have an answer for you. Make them have multiple answers so you don't run out of gas. Because again, you're going to start to top deck, and you want to make sure that you're having a card in play to get to do something with that. That's why we're running 1 copy of tech. I could be swayed to add more. As of right now, I've not found games are going late enough for me to want more than 1. But I have them in the sideboard still, specifically for the matchups where getting that tech out and being able to play my resources is the only opportunity I'd have to win. So specifically against Quinlan, I want more techs in there. All right, last thing is just closing the game. So this deck is very tempo driven. You're, again, trying to flip Han, get a bunch of stats out there, a bunch of units. And this deck actually has quite a few opportunities to get cheeky damage from hand or from the resource row. Currently, I have the Surprise Strikes in the sideboard, but I do want to say if you want to add them in the main board, that's totally fine. I added Spark of Rebellion because I personally like to make sure I'm not going to get blown out by something. But if you want that to be a Surprise Strike to have more reach from hand and to close the games a little bit more efficiently, totally justified. There's so many easy ways to get this Falcon online, to get Vernestra online, that you can play them. It's 3 damage. I love Cassian and all the red hero decks that I've ever played. Big Quinlan player. Love Cassian in that list to just kind of have something to come over the top to finish the games. And with Kellerin, with Ewing, you can really consistently get this Falcon or Vernestra out there to just close out the game right on the spot. And you usually will have the force available to have Vernestra come in ready. Hot Shot's a classic. One thing to remember though is this will never cost one for you. You are not running red, so it's almost always correct to put it in the resource row. There's a couple of situations where you may not want to. Let's say you have another one in there and you want the +4 rather than the +2. It doesn't say when played using Smuggle you may attack with it. It says attack, so you have to attack with it. So if you need that extra bit, sometimes it's okay to keep it in your hand, but for the most part, go ahead and put it in your resource row. It'll still cost 3, and you get the action cheating and being able to attack on the spot, which is always good. For this deck in particular, some decks, yes, you want the game to go a little bit, like you want your turn to go longer. This is not one of those decks for the most part. So a lot of options, but remember that breakpoint for the most part is 3, sometimes 2, for what cards you have available to you. And so trying to push your opponent to those breakpoints so that you can win the game is key. I have had some lucky wins where you Ewing and get the Falcon and Vernestra and win that way for 6 damage instead. Not reliable. Wouldn't recommend like making that your primary win con. Usually you're wanting to either kill them with what's already on board or get close enough where playing either of these would help you win the game. Also, if you were trying to play tech from the resource row, it cost you 9 resources to play tech and one of these. So just a reminder, it's not really a reliable way to do that. So usually you're having to search for it with one of those abilities. But I have 6 copies of those 2 cards for a reason, because I want it to be as consistent as possible with having an opportunity to find those at the end of the game. All right, wanted to hit on meta. Not going to spend too much time on here. Just wanted to kind of quick hit some of these. Han Solo is obviously very popular. You do want to control their board early, but you also want to flip the script and whittle down their health as soon as possible. Keeping them off the force is great, but let them play slow. If they do anything that slows down their tempo, they're going to lose on the spot. So be mindful of some of the cards they can play. Be mindful of they can also play a card a turn earlier. So remember the Poe can come down on 4 instead of 5. Remember that Luke can come down on 6 instead of 7. Just a lot of things on there that you just need to watch out for. But if you're playing smart, remembering what answers they have, that's actually a matchup I haven't had an issue with, and that is one that is force throwing you. So just trying your best to just really play that tempo game. I usually don't use the Han ability. If you can get one of the 2 drops, I know there's only 5 copies of them, so it's hard to rely on. You're going to be in a great spot. And then, finding a way to kill Yoda or Ogdo Bogdo as early as possible is key. If you can do like Obi-Wan into General's Blade, that's amazing. A lot of things to mess with there. But not too bad of a matchup, honestly, from at least what I've played so far. Sabine has been great so far as well. You can fight for the board pretty easily. A lot of easy ways to get to 5 damage. Sometimes it's a little tough to combat their space, but definitely prioritize playing cards that can do that. You have blue leader in here as well as Falcon, so a lot of early opportunities to get to deal that early damage in space and do that. You do want to control their board and then quickly turn the tables to be playing big units that are going to kill them quickly. Because Sabine is one of those, if she gets you within 8 to 10, you can die pretty quickly, even just from things from her hand. And so being mindful of that, try to preserve your life total, but don't play so controlling that you give her more opportunities to come over the top at the end of the game. Also be pushing damage as you can. Also just wanted to include a few different ones in here. We have Mother Talzin and Kira. Talzin's a little tough just because of her -1/-1s. Again, another one that you're the aggressor, push the agenda, push the tempo, and try to play around force throw as much as you can. Talzin doesn't have as much late game as some of the others typically. So if you play the 7/7, usually they won't have the 7 drop to just wipe your board there. But the Talzin flip turn is the one to watch out for. So on that turn 5 or 5 resource turn, they're trying to kill your ground side, go wide on their side. And whether that's buffing Talzin or playing just a big unit, that's a turn that can really get scary. And so be mindful of that. Try to play around a lot on that turn. That's actually a pretty tricky matchup, but one that's not unwinnable. I have Kira on here, but that's really just representing all the blue-green villain shenanigans. Go wide as best you can. Play a lot of units. Yoda's one that's good, but I would resource early because it's not getting 2 units down. Kira has a lot of ways to power the dark side. Avenger late game, things like that that are just trying to kill 1 unit at a time. So if you can go wide on board, it's pretty hard for Kira to beat you. You're definitely going to play aggressively, try to whittle their health down as quickly as possible. ECL lists are really tough if they pull Vader, which they're typically trying to do. Data Vault isn't as bad, but being mindful of the Kira overwhelming barrage play, or plenty of other opportunities for Kira to clear your board. So as best you can, keep a wide board going against those blue-green villains. Quinlan is tough. Gonna be real. They have a lot of things that peel cards from your hand. Therefore, only use the Han ability when it's a huge tempo swing opportunity, and you can play around a lot of them. Again, you got to remember Force Throw. Ahsoka and Spark of Rebellion are the cards that they just always will have available to them. Sometimes they're not playing Spark in the main deck, sometimes it's in the sideboard, but they at least have it in the 60, if not the 50. Kylo's tough. They can get a lot of scary units out early. This is where Ambush is your friend, and clearing those units is huge. They're fine to upgrade some of those because if they kill them with the upgrade on it, they can get them back with Kylo anyway. So just remember they don't always throw all of their upgrades into the discard pile. Sometimes they will buff their early plays because they know once it goes to discard anyway, they still get it. Migs is a great card in here. Kill Migs on the spot. But also another deck that try to go wide, try to have options to get around the Kylo flip turn. If they get the snapshot reflexes, it's tough to get through for sure. But trying to, just play a lot of tempo so they have to flip early rather than getting to really set up their deck well is key here. I would probably sub in the Spark of Rebellions. I know it feels weird since they're trying to get their cards into the discard pile. But Anakin is great in this list and can really do some damage against you because they very easily get a heroic and a villainy card in their discard pile. So therefore, Anakin coming out here can just wipe your whole board, which is terrible. So again, push early damage. This one, I'm actually more okay to aggressively use the Han ability because you are trying to kill them as early as possible. Qui-Gon's really good in this list. Dealing 7 damage to Kylo on their flip turn is great, and then usually you just need to attack with 1 more unit to kill Kylo if they bring him out on turn 7. So Qui-Gon's great in this list, or against this as well. I don't have much experience against Boba Data Vault yet. I know that's been really popular. Wanted to put it on here, something to be mindful of though. Because you go so wide though, a lot of the indirect damage doesn't hurt you nearly as badly. You're able to get a lot of units down, and so things you're trying to play around is of course the Boba flip turn, where they get to choose where that 4 damage is going on your units, as well as trying to win the game before like Devastator and Planetary Bombardment come down. So they're typically playing those in there, unless they're going with the total droid package, but usually they'll have that as the late game top end kind of stuff. And so yeah, keeping Boba off the flip as best you can. I love having Waylay in this list specifically for that. If you can creatively kill their space side, which again, we run more space than most Force decks do. The Blue Leader, the Bright Hope, the Millennium Falcon are really great tools to keep that board pretty clear. The tricky thing against some of those villains are they play a lot of 4 health spaceships. So Blue Villain will play that 3/4 shielded. Boba Fett plays the IG. When played, deal 3 damage or deal a damage to up to 3 units. So in Cad Bane that we're going to talk about plays the Miss Hunter. That's a 3/4 as well. So that's a little bit of a tough break point. I still want to consider some other options. I do have the Marauder in my list for those that I try to bring in for these matchups. It's less about getting that ramp if you can, great. More about a lot of these lists are running 4 health spaceships, and that just takes care of those. Where they think 3 is the break point, you actually have an ability to get to 4. Cad Bane, another one. They actually fight pretty heavily in the ground side, and we're very strong on ground. And so if you can win the ground early, you can beat Cad Bane, as well as pushing damage throughout. So that's kind of what the meta is looking like. Like I said, I am having trouble against Kylo. I am having a little bit of trouble against Quinlan, but again, just play around the blowout turns. Make sure you're pushing some tempo and understanding if they can do this, I would lose on the spot. So do your best to play around those. Unless you absolutely can't and then they were going to beat you anyway, then it's okay to play into those. But just be really mindful of the things that they're trying to do to stop your goals. But that's most of the meta and what's going on there. And so last thing I wanted to hit on real quick, and this video's going a little bit long, just cards that I've considered that aren't currently in the list. I would consider them, and if you want to try them, go for it. Youngling Padawan I've already talked about, but getting the Force early is great. I just don't think the 2-3 stat line is strong enough to see play in this deck. Plo Koon is another one that it's not too hard to get 3 units out on the board, especially if you're like, let me play Han and then Plo Koon and potentially a 2-drop. There's lines there that make sense. As well as Ewing with Plo Koon is great if you have a 2-drop, especially if you're playing the Youngling Padawan in that list as well, just to have more to do that. Because the 6/6 ambush is phenomenal. The reason it's not in my list is because 5 resources is a tough thing to pull off with Han. When you get to the 5 resource turn, usually you're wanting to get to 6 to deploy Han, to get to 7 to play something even bigger. So it's just that awkward point where on the turn that you would typically be playing Plo Koon, you actually don't want to play Plo Koon. And then if you're getting later in the game, I'd rather be playing 7 drops than 5 drops, just to kind of finish the game right there. So depending on the meta situation, I would consider bringing it back in, but as of right now, I'm not seeing it be as valuable as it is, let's say, in the Quinlan Tarkentown deck, where it's usually coming out and dealing 7 damage on that 5 resource turn, and doing much better. But in this deck, not nearly as strong, even though we're Force, even though it gets the Force online right away, because we're not so reliant on using the Force, and 5's an awkward turn, it's not in here. Luke is kind of a placeholder for the out of aspect casino builds that have been going around. That's been a staple of Han for a long time. So you have Luke, you have Darth Maul, you can play Cad Bane. Basically, the casino build is I have a lot of cards in my deck that wouldn't be played in yellow green hero, but because Ewing doesn't care about the aspect penalty, you can play them with Ewing. This deck isn't so invested in Ewing that it needs something like that, but if that's your style of play, I think this deck still works by doing that. So it could be a fun way to surprise your opponent. I've considered having a few of these just in my sideboard that can come in and they just really don't expect it. So game 1 is just a traditional yellow-green ramp tempo, and then game 2 comes in and maybe I play the 7-drop Mace Windu as well as a Maul. Those cards that can come in, ambush in right away, and just really surprise your opponent and kill them on the spot. And so, yeah, I've considered those. Currently, I'm not running them. I'm just trying to figure out how strong is this deck naturally. And then I'll kind of consider, like, okay, is it better to lean in more to some of those, like, swingier turns? That this deck is pretty consistent, so it's not the end of the world to play into those. And if I can pull it off, great. If not, no big deal. It's not so much of my strategy that I'm like reliant on Ewing to happen. Last card in here is just Reinforcement Walker. Because you're ramping quickly, it's pretty easy to get to a high resource total. And Reinforcement Walker is amazing. It lets you draw a card, can let you heal. It's a huge unit to play out. However, because 8 drops are actually hard to pull off in Han, I've chosen not to include it. I mostly want to try Yoda and Home 1, but it's something that's always on my brain. If Yoda feels like it's underperforming, I may consider it again. If Home 1 feels like it's just too tricky to pull off, or I don't have the heroic units in my discard pile to do that, I might consider it, because it's just a great toolbox card. The only considered issue with it is it's way better in like timely intervention decks. Which right now we're not one because we have so much ambush already, but it's something that's always on my brain. Is timely intervention correct in this deck list or not? But as of right now, I don't think it is. So that's Han 1 Green with the Force synergies. Like I said, I don't think Han 1 Green's dead. I really don't. I understand the argument. I'll listen to the argument. But I do think it has enough play that it doesn't just auto lose to these matchups. I think it's unfavored for sure into some of these. But because the tempo on this is so strong, I think it's still worth pursuing. I still think it's worth trying out. You're just not playing as swingy, and so you're trying to like raise the floor of consistency, maybe lower the ceiling of like those like crazy pop off turns that just like auto win you the game on the spot. There's still that opportunity here for sure, but not as many crazy combos to try to pull off. But like I said, I still love this deck. I've had a lot of success with it, just with my local scene and just playing a lot of games. So big fan, want you to give it a try. That's why I wanted to do this video, and let me know your thoughts. If this is crazy and you're like, nope, Han 1's dead, deal with it, let me know. But at least give it a try first. So thanks so much. Happy to be back, just like Han 1. Peace out, y'all.